Episode 150, Scrupulosity with Jill Freestone.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
Jill Freestone is back on the podcast this week talking about what happens when those who have OCD bring it into religion. This type of OCD is called scrupulosity, and it happens when someone obsessively worries about their behavior going against their religious or moral beliefs. In a church that has a lot of do's and don'ts, thinking clearly and not obsessing and acting on compulsions can be very difficult for someone with OCD. Jill does a great job teaching why rules are actually there and how sometimes in order to be free of scrupulous thinking, you have to learn to break the rules not for disobedience, but so that you actually can take a higher moral road and live with more faith. Scrupulosity is probably more common than you know, and this episode will help you see where it shows up either in your own life or in the life of a loved one. If you feel you need more help overcoming scrupulosity, please reach out to Jill so she can point you in the right direction. Also, please be sure to watch this episode on YouTube so that you can see Jill's slides that contain lots of useful information. Please enjoy this episode.
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. If you are listening to this episode and you haven't listened to last week's episode, you might want to, because this is a two-part series. I have Coach Jill Freestone with me today. She was with me last week. We talked about OCD and some of the myths and how you would define it and some of the effects of treatment. And so she's here again today to kind of wrap up that discussion, to give you a little bit more education and tell you maybe where you could get help if that is something that you think you might be struggling with. So I'm going to have her introduce herself just really quick, even though she introduced herself last week, and then we'll just jump on in. Hello again, Jill.
Hi, good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Okay, tell us just a little bit and then let's just dive back in.
Yeah, so I live in Utah. I have 3 daughters, and we love to spend time outside and making music together. And I coach on anxiety and anger and big emotions and how they affect family relationships. So parent and teen, sometimes just teens or whole families.
Love it. Okay, when you say you like to make music together, do you all play instruments? Like, what does that look like when you're making music together? It's not figuratively, I'm assuming. Probably figuratively, but probably for real.
Some writing of music, yeah. But we have cello, ukulele, banjo, guitars, many guitars, mandolin, drums, just lots of instruments, and we sing. And so, yeah.
I did not know this about you. I learned something new about you today. I love it. I feel like we need to have like a special insert of your music somewhere.
Well, for me, I play piano and flute classically, and that's a high level, through class. But some of the other ones are more just folk and fun, with a family. So
yeah. Oh, I love it. Love it. Did not know that about you. And I'm happy to know that little tidbit of information. Okay. So we wrapped up last episode. We were kind of talking about the effects that can take place in your life from seeking treatment for OCD, for getting help, for recognizing maybe if your loved one is struggling with that, or if that's something that you struggle with. We talked about scrupulosity just a little bit. And I think for the sake of our audience, who are mostly religious people, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I think scrupulosity is something that I think is an important thing to talk about, because I think it's around us a lot more than we think it is. So yeah. I would love for us to dive into that a little bit and talk about that.
Yeah. So an example I like to give is that 20 years ago, when I was young, I was just told that I was stressed or, had too much going on or whatever, but we didn't have a definition for anxiety, didn't have treatments. And so now, half the population is diagnosed with anxiety. Some of that is environmental, but it's also the awareness. And the same thing with scrupulosity OCD, especially that form, is that it's has been ununderstood. Like I've been this way my whole life, but we didn't have a name for it and we didn't have treatments. And so the mission department right now, their top 3 concerns that they're actively working on education and helping are anxiety, depression, and scrupulosity.
Okay. And so for those, just really quick, scrupulosity is
religious or moral focus on
okay.
So to describe that, it's like you have this need to do moral things or to be morally good, to follow the rules and to be very strict and careful about it. And it's tricky because in our religion, there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of fear around doing what's right. There's high stakes. Mm-hmm. And this is where OCD jumps to what you care about. And so particularly if faith is very important to you, it can really attach onto that really strongly. And the trick is that it can be really challenging to heal from it because the treatment can feel like the opposite of being faithful or good or righteous. And so it can feel that way, but we're not like, we don't teach people to be the opposite of what they want.
Right.
But the thing is learning to live with uncertainty is the solution. And that's actually what faith is. But often in our religion, particularly, we say things like, I know. And that feels like certainty. Like, have you gotten an answer from God? Do you know, were your prayers answered? There's so much certainty in the language of how we do everything. And so we have to transition out of stage 1 faith into the next stage of faith of uncertainty and perplexity and handling that. So it feels like letting go of faith, but it's a more healthy version of what faith actually is. Mm-hmm. So that's another reason it's challenging to diagnose, because like the behaviors with scrupulosity can be highly rewarded and seen like, oh, this is a very righteous or obedient person. And so everyone sees the behaviors and thinks, oh, they're doing all they're supposed to do. So proud of them. And they might even get more callings, throughout church leadership because they're doing things so well. For some, it can look like excessive repenting about the same thing, not ever feeling forgiven or worthy, like really fear-based obedience or a fear-based relationship with God. And just this compulsive checking, compulsive guilt and worry that you've sinned. Like, did I offend God? Did I do something wrong? Those kinds, I don't deal with that, but I'm also highly perfectionist so that I'm not leaving room for the need to worry or repent.
Okay.
Checking, seeking reassurance, repenting, trying to control things, perfectionism, strict obedience. So for me, just to explain, it's slightly different. The obsessions can look like normal things. Like I've got to make sure people don't unnecessarily suffer, or that I won't be misunderstood, needing to have long conversations or explain things correctly, needing certainty, but not in everything. There's just like certain areas that's really strong, or rigid black and white thinking, which a lot of people think anxiety have that. But again, we have to see the function of that. If things just aren't right, the rules need to be followed. Like I need to keep people happy, or I need to control things. So those are what I'm obsessing with when it shows up. And then the compulsions are needing to save people, needing to make sure things are just right, help people not suffer ignorantly, long conversations to discuss things, to be understood, some people-pleasing behaviors, which back in the beginning, like with coaching, I would hear people say, oh, with life coaching, I learned to stop people-pleasing. And so then I would feel wrong of like, why can I not get over this? And until we realized what the root was, because I kept trying to just coach my way. And so there'd be a temporary relief and I'd feel better, but it was never like solved. And it's not like you can ever like completely solve some things that are OCD or trauma related. Like some people feel like they need to do that because of a certain trauma. We need to go and heal that. Like feeling unworthy can be related to that as well. Some lack of attachment. So anyway, controlling things, analyzing, researching, checking, and suffering so others don't have to. So with mine, so much of that was in my head, or it looked like a healthy behavior. And so it's like the OCD is OCDing upon itself, like thinking about the thoughts, over analyzing the thoughts, which is similar to self-coaching. So, yeah.
So I would think, and I'm hearing you talk about scrupulosity, and this is probably the time of my life. Like I know a lot of people who have kids on missions, lots of my family, nieces and nephews have been on missions. And I sometimes feel like a mission is like an incubator for scrupulosity. And I don't want to, I'm not to sound negative but I just think it's important for people to be
Aware.
educated on and aware of the lingo, so that when their kids are calling home and telling them certain things, they can be like, they can see the red flags and hopefully get some help for them, because I see it have lasting effects for them when they come home.
Yes, this is where it shows up for a lot of young people, is on the mission, where they were highly functioning and doing okay until they get put into that incubator of a situation where it will intensify OCD. If you already have it, it will intensify anxiety and depression.
So it's not like a mission is causing OCD. It's that it's already been there, but they're just now in a situation where it's heightening those things.
Yeah. There are some ways that it can increase some OCD that maybe you never would have had if you hadn't been there. And that's so people will say it caused it.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say for sure, the environmental versus nature nurture situation. But knowing that a situation where you have such rigid rules and rigid requirements, and there are certain blessings or certain ways that people talk about it, like exact obedience, will bring baptisms, like phrases like that are very dangerous, even for a non-OCD person, that you start fixating on, if I don't follow this rule, I won't get a baptism. And you can start to just have crazy anxiety.
Well, that, and just from a general perspective, it really skews our view of God. Like, it starts to put him in this transactional perspective, which is so unhealthy for us to view him that way. It's skewing what his true nature is. And I think you can spend a lifetime trying to unwind that.
Yeah, you start to believe that your specific obedient actions will become that vending machine God. And that's, it's very dangerous. And so I guess while we're talking about that, how religion can breed, like there's some other things like that, just being aware, like what phrases might sound that way, and then being able to check, like if your child is on a mission, how are they interpreting it? So like, for example, I've had different clients where they have anxiety, or if it's OCD that's showing up, and we're figuring out what help to give them. Like, well, this talk was said, or my mission president said this, because I've talked to some missionaries, and that phrase just keeps triggering them, and they keep fixating on it. And I said, let's take this phrase and understand what your mission president or the prophet meant. What's the meaning or the value underneath this? Can we switch the words so that it's not so extreme or intense for you to gain the benefit from it without feeling so much anxiety and pain? There's also certain dynamics in the mission that can look like all or nothing thinking. That we tend to get really extreme, or like some of those mental habits, like catastrophizing or taking responsibility for things that aren't your fault, that personalization of things. We can feel that way, kind of like we thought of, like, oh, I didn't do this, so it's my fault that person didn't join the church, or perfectionism, or like jumping to big conclusions. So if you're noticing some of that kind of thinking that's unhealthy, like you can watch for those things. It's also like if you're getting rewarded for that. So like you make sure you follow all these rules, and then you feel like there was a reward, so then you want to keep doing it.
Well, and we are kind of trained to look for that reward too, right? Like look for God's hand in your life. So we are seeking to see that reward, and then it does get rewarded because we notice it. And so it continues.
Or we're taught, like, never think an evil thought, or watch your thoughts day and night, pray constantly. Like some of those kind of statements can lead you to be compulsively in your head about your religion and constantly overanalyzing yourself. But you think it's constantly repenting. Like, we need to be thinking of Jesus. And did I think of Jesus enough today? Like, and so are we able to just be a human living like Jesus, or are we in our brain about all of it?
That's a really good distinction. Are we able to be a human living like Jesus, or are we just in our head thinking about? I just think that's a profound distinction that we have to pay attention to that.
And I think like religion itself may not cause OCD, but some of the requirements might do it. So like there's an intense attempt at suppression of intrusive thoughts. Like I described earlier, you're guilty if you have these kind of thoughts. So you're trying so hard to control your thinking. If you think certain things, you're going to burn in hell, or you're sexually immoral. Like, look on a woman to lust after her, you've already committed adultery in your heart. Like, that's a thought action fusion that's not true. And like that can send you spinning. Or like you start to believe that the importance of thoughts are more important than deeds. Like, I've got to just suppress things, or just thinking an impure thought is a sin, or just watching like really strict obedience. Because so on the mission too, like we have all these rules, and the rules are there to keep people safe, but also to encourage people that are lazy and rebellious to try and have a little framework to keep them going. The rules are not there for the perfectionists and the OCD people and the high anxiety people. They're already going to be looking for, how do I do everything right? And can I make sure I'm doing it? They're already looking for that. And so with this type of person, we need to say, the rules there and the statements that are told that are all or nothing are not for you. They're for this other person who needs those.
Do they believe that though? I'm just curious. Will they believe that when you say that?
They do until, I mean, it depends on how much training they've had.
Okay.
Because my daughters are this way. It comes to this moment where they suddenly realize, oh, this is one of those moments where I need to break a rule. And it's like they have to come down to that moment and make that first, okay, this is the love, the person I'm talking to, whatever, this is more important than the rule. And this is that moment. And this is really hard. But it has to, like, you have to do that first one and then realize, okay, that felt horrible, but it was wise.
But they weren't able to do that before they were educated to know that, like, this is when this is what is happening here.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of, like, with our temple recommend interviews or the lists of commandments and the rules and the tests and, high pressure, with the temple. And there's some fear-based teachings, like about God or Satan, like almost like Santa, like they're always watching and they know your thoughts and deeds and they're mad at you and disappointed. Like some of that teaching needs to be cleared up, or some kind of shame-based teachings that the church is moving away from, like withholding the sacrament or the temple recommend, or some porn teachings that are, or modesty teachings around sex that are shame-based. Like some of those can become really compulsive. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. Just when you look at the rules or the commandments or the thoughts, like, oh, I should be thinking about Jesus, or I should be praying always, just being able to step back and, what does that mean?
Yeah. And what is this effect is it having on my life? Is it actually, like, I guess I'm just throwing this in here and maybe I'm wrong, but is it helping me to actually live like Jesus? Or like you said, am I just stuck in my head over this and just not getting anywhere?
Is it more important for you to be to church to receive the sacrament than it is to be changed by the sacrament? Like there's so many statements we're given, like if you do read your scriptures daily, your family will be saved. Like there's these promises and these specific things. If family evening regularly, your kids won't ever leave the church. Like those are dangerous statements to say, because it's actually ignoring agency. And or like, if you attend the temple regularly, I promise you. So watch for those statements, because they tend to be all or nothing. And you want to look at what you believe about that. So I have some clients that they're, like I said, being on time to church, or you have to take of the sacrament, or you're a bad parent. But then you start yelling at your kids and creating this horrible environment, trying to get them there and shaming them afterwards. What really is important here? Has the sacrament itself changed you? Or is it just that you checked it off that you were there, but then you're feeling horrible the whole day and the whole time while you're even there?
Yeah. If they have the compulsion to repent, like, then you've given yourself a whole lot of material to repent of. And just keep that loop going. This can be a tricky conversation, because when you have this conversation about scrupulosity, it feels like a lot of negativity around our culture. And so, it's a little bit of a tricky one. So then you get, people like, then what's the point? Like, why, if it's around us so much, why do we choose to stay? And not that this episode is about that, but maybe I don't know. What would you say to that answer, to that question?
Most of the things that I was talking about are misunderstandings of what the religion actually is. And misunderstanding Jesus, or misunderstanding God, misunderstanding grace or atonement. And some traditions or some teachings that aren't effective. And the church is always about identifying those things and updating and making changes. There were things that we used to do a long time ago that, we don't see anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a process of learning and growing.
And it's a slow process too, right? Like there's things that we're like, okay, enough already. Can we stop using this lingo or whatever? But it's slow and
everywhere. It's not just the church. Like you're going to see this in school. You're going to see this in your job. It's going to show up everywhere around just moral issues, politics and education systems. Like it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Cause I do think that that is important to kind of hold on to that piece, right? Like it is misunderstandings. It is, and our job is to seek and continue to restore truth. And that includes within our own minds. So we get to do that. That is one of the things that we get to do. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about how to be evaluated, where people can go to find help and to go get the proper help. Because I think you did in the first episode that we did on this, you talked about the fact that there are so many therapists who aren't really trained in OCD or different subtypes. So I would love for you to be able to share that with people.
Yeah, so I'm sharing my screen here of the most effective treatment. In the previous episode, she said we talked about that not all therapists are trained, and that's really important because I was misdiagnosed 15 years ago. OCD is just really tricky, and it's a bully, and it just jumps around, and it's sneaky. So it's nice to, call it those things and know that it takes an OCD trained therapist, not just any therapist, because you can go and they'll be like, oh no, it's just anxiety. They might be right, they might be wrong.
I love that you called it a bully. I love that you call it that because it really separates it from who you are.
Oh yeah.
And it gives you a little bit of leverage. So thank you for saying that.
Such a bully. And we want to call it out. Be like, yeah, you're getting bullied right now by OCD. And you're going to talk back to it and stand up to that bully. And that it's not necessarily that we're going to fight the bully, because fighting the bully can be engaging with it. It's that I'm like, I don't care about you. And you give it less power. Like, whatever.
Yes.
So ERP is the treatment, which is exposure and response prevention, meaning that you're exposed to the obsession, but you prevent and respond differently. So you're preventing yourself from doing that usual response, and you're responding differently. And for some people, that can sound like just doing an urge, like, oh, I'm feeling the urge and I'm not acting on it. But there's more involved with it, where that you're fixating. I don't want to use the word fixating. You're allowing yourself to be comfortable with uncertainty, where your brain is searching for certainty. And so then you're feeling the discomfort of your body, and you're using some kind of a statement like maybe, maybe not, or whatever, to let your brain start repeating that over and over again until you start to feel your brain just gets bored, because it's looking for certainty and it realizes you're not going to give it certainty. And then it's just going to go somewhere else and do something else. So
I'm thinking back to the example that you gave of maybe one of your daughters, like, this is what this is, like, this is OCD coming in right here, and it's going to feel terrible, but this is what I'm going to allow this right now. Is that what you're describing there?
Yeah. You allow the discomfort. So say with the hand washing, like, you look at your hand and you're like, well, I've already washed it 10 times. I'm still not sure if they're clean, but I'm going to just sit here and feel the horrible uncertainty in my body and this anxiety and this need to feel it, but I'm not going to go wash the hands. I mean, like, maybe they're clean, maybe they're not. Maybe they're clean, maybe they're not. Maybe I'm going to get sick, maybe I'm not. And your brain is, again, you're forcing your brain to focus on the uncertainty instead of the certainty, and to just accept that uncomfortable feeling that we cannot know for sure. Because there's hardly anything that we can know for sure. And so it's like this, the amygdala, that fight flight response, is in the healthy response, it's going on, but with anxiety, it goes off when it's not even dangerous. And with OCD as well, it's like your brain is like on fire all the time, going crazy about things. So the DBT here, dialectical behavior therapy, it includes a lot of mindfulness and self-compassion to be able to take care of yourself and to be aware of the physical sensations in the present moment with compassion. Lots of that. And to be able to hold two truths at the same time. Like what we talked about with church, of like, my mission president might have taught me this, and he could have believed that was helpful for most of the missionaries, but for me, it's not. Those could be two true things. And it's not that he's a bad man, or the prophet may have said this statement in this way. And for a lot of people in the church, that may be fine for them. But for me, that is a very dangerous and triggering and damaging way to think about it. Or even, past parts of the church may have been harmful, but it's still a prophet. Can you handle two truths at the same time? So then acceptance and commitment therapy, this being able to have this compassion and purely accept what's happening in the present moment, and not need to change it, fix it, but to just full acceptance with that compassion. It's tricky, but that's the so that's the treatment.
Yeah.
So not giving reassurance, it says, not saying that everything's going to be okay. Avoid that. And then avoid just using plain CBT or thinking through it or the model.
When you
Just
say CBT, will you
cognitive behavioral therapy, which is talk therapy or a way of choosing different thoughts or noticing how your thoughts create your feelings and trying to think your way logically through something that creates more OCD, meaning it keeps you in that loop. And so anytime you notice this is a moment of OCD, we do not want to use any kind of cognitive logical thought work.
Yeah.
That's what increased mine. And it actually helped me get diagnosed, which was great. But
right.
it took a couple of years of pain. So yeah. And then, so to get help, this next slide has some
And just because I don't think we mentioned this, if you are listening to this, we are also showing this on our YouTube channel, and we've linked to that in our show notes. Jill is going to say the words here, but if you want to be able to visually look at these slides that have these links or the information on it, you can go to our YouTube channel to see that. So sorry, Jill, but I wanted to get that in there.
Yeah. So in Utah, there is an OCD and anxiety treatment center. There's two of them. I think it's Bountiful and South Jordan. If you just Google that, then you'll see the phone number on the website. The OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. If you're not nearby, the website treatmyocd.com, or it's NOCD, no CD. You can speak with someone over, virtually there, and they can help you figure out and get a diagnosis or not. And they have groups there. Just to understand more about it, the IOCDF. So that organization can also help you. They have a lot of information there. Psychology Today, when you look up a therapist, if you're just trying to find a specific therapist, you want to make sure that they treat OCD with ERP. Because if it just says that they treat OCD and they're using just CBT, that would be a red flag.
Or and define ERP for us again. ERP is
exposure and response prevention. That's the gold standard treatment for OCD. So if they treat tons of things and they're not a specialist in OCD, I wouldn't go there. Like if they specialize in just a couple areas, and OCD is one of them, and they should be talking about doing exposures and skills to practice instead of engaging in the compulsion.
Okay.
So like the most recent person that I'm referring out, he was like, yeah, I had a therapist who was helping with this, and he did exposures. And I asked him, what does that mean? And he talked about the exposures, but it was just exposing yourself to the thing, but not doing something different. And it was a really tricky, because this therapist was actually giving him a lot of reassurance. Like one of his things he was fixated on was vaccines and how bad they were. And the therapist just spent lots of time agreeing with him and talking with him about, yeah, they're so horrible. I can't imagine how you can handle this. But that was just feeding into the loop of how bad it was. And so in the conversation, I said, I'm not going to tell you my position on vaccines. We're going to talk about how this is a trigger, and so that you can stop, as we're trying to get him help. Because sometimes that's what happens is people come to me and we're talking about other things, and then this shows up and like, okay, this looks like OCD. Like, have you been evaluated? Here's what we need to do. But at the same time, they're feeling such high anxiety, and my skills are a lot in somatic regulation and emotional skills of helping them become safe. I have done a lot of trauma-informed trainings as well, as to when their brain is going crazy as soon as they hear or think about OCD, to help them be safe until they're there and not just leave them hanging. Something that I didn't mention is the difference between anxiety and OCD. Because you think, it's just anxiety, and it sounds like anxiety, but with anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder, there's a threat, and you worry about it and you have anxiety. And it's usually about normal things like flying or social anxiety or driving in a car or taking a test or something, or performance anxiety. But with OCD, there's the threat and the obsession and a compulsion. And so being able to differentiate those two, that anxiety is part of OCD, but there's also the compulsiveness, the behaviors in your brain or outside that are triggered to reduce the anxiety. And also, like, OCD is usually about some kind of random weird things, kind of like the weird stuff.
Okay.
Or it's a normal thing, but like kind of random and weird, and not everybody's worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you spending so much time about that little thing?
It's good to have a witness to your life sometimes, right? To have somebody to be like, Oh gosh. Well, Jill, thank you. I think is there anything else? I don't want to if there's something else on your mind that you feel like we need to share.
Something with like intrusive thoughts, like we might be telling our kids or a spouse or client or someone like to be able to choose a better thought, like, and just trying to figure out, like, could I repeatedly think through this and try to find a better thought, like that increases it. And so really, if we've identified that it is OCD, just to be able to allow it to be there and like, oh, I don't care. Yeah, that's there. Oh, OCD, you're a bully, you're trying to be here. Like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, as far as certainty relates. So I think we talked about that a little bit, but just being able to support in a helpful way and do even support yourself. That's why I think it's important to just check and find out.
Yeah. Well, I love how you even just said, you gave the example a couple of times, I think, where your husband was like, do you think this is OCD right now? Like this is what this is. I just think even bringing that up, it's not allowing the bully in, right? It's just helping you take a stand against the bully and be like, oh yeah, I don't need this. I don't need to listen to this, but it's there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's so much good information. I am excited for people to be able to hear this and to be educated and hopefully be able to get help if it's something that they need. Can you share with people where they can find more of you?
Yeah, my name is Jill Freestone. So that's my website, just jillfreestone.com. And on Instagram, I'm Jill Freestone Coaching. And other podcasts that I've been on, you can find those on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a treat. And I'm going to make you play your flute or the piano for me someday. Oh, I love that. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I know that there's some information here that has got to be helpful for so many. So please share this with others and let's just keep helping the world to be a better place for all of us. Thanks, Jill. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.